So point two is life is difficult, including knowing what is right. That is a subset of the difficulty. Life is difficult overall, and that includes our intellectual space, our certainty, uh, our interactions with meaning.
Hmm.
That's what I was saying when you brought up that point of the space exists where you can think these things and you can get in your own way and you can definitely experience hopelessness and brokenness and whatnot. That is part of reality. And so this is what I'm acknowledging here. Life is difficult. And anyone who says differently is selling something. And yes, that's a reference to The Princess Bride, or an allusion to The Princess
Oh,
Bride. So people who are like, well, it's easy. You just have to think these things, or you just have to be certain about this one point. Don't question about why you're certain about that, but here's the thing to be certain about, and then just build everything off there. Anyone who's handing you or trying to invite you to the easy path, I think, is fudging some numbers somewhere. I think
mm,
just everything's difficult, and that's a baseline to start at. But as hopefully I've already illustrated, this is not a pessimistic view. And so the point of saying life is difficult is to bring about the want for understanding in ourselves and the compassion towards others. Because if something is difficult, and this is something that Steve and I talked about in our podcast because it's in my book, but if something is difficult, by definition, that means there's a high failure rate. So if you see people failing and struggling, that's not like, oh, what weaklings, how unexpected. Because if you think people are weak for failing, that means you think life is easy. Because the only way for things, for everyone to be doing well and flourishing would be if things were easy. But because things are
mm,
difficult, okay, we see a lot of misunderstanding, we see a lot of difficulty, we see a lot of suffering. That's not just, oh, that's their fault, they're weak. No, life is difficult. So therefore, when we see people failing, that is just that is the natural outcome of things being difficult. And so the appropriate response there should be understanding and compassion. That's
mm,
my contention with that point.
mm.
I would say that there needs to be a challenge to life. Difficult, yes, but that's because again we're interfacing with something. There needs to be something that we're doing. If we're not engaging, if there's no action, then things atrophy and they disintegrate. If you don't consistently use a muscle, you'll lose it. It's the same thing with just existence. If you stagnate, then you're just not, that's the worst. I think is just not going in any direction. Just, I
Mhm.
mean, I guess you're not going backwards. That's good. But if there's, let's say, an influx of convenience into our lives, okay, we're not washing our dishes anymore. We're not washing our clothes, so we save time doing that. But now what are we doing? Are
Mm.
we satiated? Are we sitting on a couch eating cheese puffs? Or are we engaging in something that is potentially difficult, that is challenging? Because if we want to ever get to that coveted flow state, a prime ingredient of getting into that flow state is a level of challenge. If things are too easy, then you're not doing anything. And so, you know, we look at we I really like the word whimsy,
Mm.
because that insinuates a level of curiosity and unknowing. You haven't experienced it before, so there's wonder, there's awe. You don't know what's you remember the first time you worked out at the gym, but you don't remember the second 153rd time that you worked out at the gym. And so an aspect of that is challenge, trying new things and embracing that, being okay with that, looking at I believe there's a book by Ryan Holiday. I haven't read it, but I believe the title is "The Obstacle Is the Way."
Mm.
Looking at a challenge as growth, as potential growth, than a setback and a wall. Because if you've noticed, I've done this in my life. If, let's say, I look at something as insurmountable, I won't attack it, but instead I'll revert back. I'll do something that is comfortable.
Mm.
I'll suck on a binky or hold my little blankie because I'm too uncomfortable. I don't want to take hold of that challenge. So let's say whether it's nicotine or whatever the case may be that makes me feel comfortable in the moment so I don't have to face whatever the obstacle is. But if we just change our perspectives,
Mm.
look at life as being as the difficulties of life as being good, as being a chance for growth. And instead of asking God for the storm to go away, we're asking God for the strength to go through the storm, knowing that we can go through it, knowing that we can go through it. That's a big point. And so it's shifting, and I think specifically with men, and specifically with men here, it's engaging in activities that promote resistance, that promote challenge, that promote self-inquiry, whether that's competing with others in a contact sport, whether that's doing something like rock climbing or working out where you're challenging yourself, whatever the case may be, engage in something that is helping you identify strengths and weaknesses within yourself so that you can put wind in the sails of those strengths, and then you can properly identify those weaknesses and really cultivate those so that they can become strengths themselves.
Mm. So I heard maybe two main points there. One, you were talking about convenience, and I think you were saying that convenience is a problem essentially because it's a lie. Like when we get the dishwasher, the whatever, like we have all these promises of like, oh, now life's going to be easy. Now they've got that one more appliance, that one more accommodation. Now that'll make things easy.
It,
But
it, it can. If I can just say, see, it can. It provides that potential. You can fill the time in with whatever you want. You can fill it in with watching Real Housewives, or you
Yeah.
can learn a new language.
Yeah,
right,
well said.
right, exactly. And then the question of um, difficulty is kind of a neutral statement, and then you're framing it as, well, challenge because we're responding to the difficulty in a certain way, which I think is a really core point of, and it comes to how do we view ourselves? What kind of beings are we? And that determines our view on that determines on how we're gonna move forward and interact.
Exactly.
What you got on that, Ryan?
Yeah. Once again, it's so rich a topic that yeah, it also covers everything. Life is difficult. Yeah, I really like what you were saying there, Stephen, about the obstacle is the way. Um, I yeah, that's such a deep lesson to learn. And it seems like repeatedly it just keeps like zooming, like it's just bigger and bigger. Yeah, I just realized like all of life might be the way. Like I'm like, okay, now I'm like doing well at this one specific task. Like I've gotten into after living out of a van during grad school. Before that, I had never been into cleaning things, but then I got it. Like you had to clean if you were going to live in a van. You take out three things, and all of a sudden it's a disaster area. So in order to move around, I needed to be clean. One thing led to another, and I started like over 3 years finding joy from cleaning.
Hmm.
And I was like, what the heck is going on? My mom would have never believed that that would have happened. My dad's still having trouble figuring it out. And just realizing like, oh wow, there's actually joy in doing this, and I gain a sense of peace. And on my like weekends, especially after a difficult week, I love just spending like half a day just listening to a good audiobook and just like cleaning the whole house, which is so weird. Like
Yes.
I'm also the same guy that absolutely loves a lot of like things that would typically be considered like hedonistic, whether it's like video games or like drinking a nice beer or eating a delicious dessert. Love ice cream. Like I got into nicotine this last year. What a substance. And and other hobbies that are purely recreational, maybe, or at least more recreational. But it's funny because no, I get joy and also something else from engaging in the difficulty of cleaning or like of these other more adaptive, even recreational parts of my life. Whether it is rock climbing, I can't just I don't know, I need to choose a challenge in order to
Mhm.
have the most fun and get the most out of it. Um, yeah, like with all the sports that I participate in. And yet it's also if I only am trying after fun, or if I'm only trying after completing the task, if I do either of those two too much, then I also suffer in some weird way if I do that for too
Mhm.
long. Like, I don't know, I'm very blessed and privileged to have had periods of my life where I've gotten to just have very little responsibility and to be able to recreate. And it gets boring and your
Mhm.
soul just starts to wither, or at least that's what it felt like for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I realized like, oh wow, I need the balance. Um, I've also been on the other side of the spectrum where it's like too much responsibility and not
Sure.
enough other things. And it's funny because yeah, it's this balance of it all. So I would agree that it's not easy and that anyone saying that like life is not difficult, including knowing what's right. That's the other thing.
Right. We haven't
We
even touched on that.
Everything that we say right now is not the full picture.
Sure. Yeah.
It can all be taken out of context, and there's always more to be said and more
Right.
nuance to learn.
Yes.
Like, and that's the other part that's like, I think I was really hard on certain institutions like religion, like, well, really any institution that was saying anything that they claimed was right. I'm like, oh well, there's all no, I could always poke holes and do all this other stuff, but then I realized like, well, is there anything that is truly the right words? And I found some things that really seem to resonate, but they're very few and far between.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That point sounds really cool where you're looking at that's that lesson to learn over and over again, like all of life is the way or all of life could be the way.
Hmm.
And I would say, it's something that'll just like reoccur, like, oh, this place too, oh, this place too. So you could go on sort of trying to learn that infinitely. But I would say
Hmm.
the meta lesson is the how you're considering yourself is am I a being who is here to just be flooded with like be served basically just servants giving me whatever they want and just satisfying my hedonism whenever it comes up. Am I a being that is meant to just be satiated and stagnate, or uh, something that wouldn't have occurred to me as a younger person? But is it possible? I mean, I think it is possible, but let's consider the possibility that I am fundamentally, by nature, I am a being that is built to engage and serve and work. I am something that needs that challenge. And so in that sense, life is difficult, but that means life is properly constructed for your nature. If you think my nature is just to sit here and stagnate, well, that's going to conflict with the world. But if I'm a being who's supposed to engage and supposed to take the obstacle as the way, then actually life is really set up for me to flourish, even though it's difficult and annoying sometimes and whatnot. And so there's the dual view of what kind of being am I, and how do I look at the world? Do I look at the world as I just am kind of this being in a random place for again, we're back to the meaning, for no reason? Or if there's meaning in the world, is it possible that even up to everything in my life is part of that structure of the flourishing way of, hey, actually, even though for a moment it might be more fun to kick your feet up and play video games, if you spend your that half day on your weekends cleaning up, over the long run, you're gonna
Mm.
find one that cleaning is not like this alien burden that is torturous to your soul. Actually, your soul flourishes and blooms through it. And there's many other things like that where it's like there's a part of me that wants to argue about doing it, but yeah, if you have that orientation towards life where like maybe everything that comes my way is something to help me.
Hmm. Hmm.